about stuff that
we can talk freely without anybody getting mad at us because they don't know who to get mad at.
Well, they just don't. Yeah, they got mad. They just won't know who. They just won't know who to kill.
And a picture instead of pull up at us.
Yeah.
Or Fox, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, we could look into doing that. So let's talk with Ben. So where do you want to start, Ben?
So I mean, one of the things that I think.
Yep.
One of the things. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to start with was kind of getting into. I wanted to see how we could paint a parallel picture of what has been going on with our country now and how it's along the same lines of the art that you explained and how that's so this is something that happened back in that movie, the art movie that was being censored.
Yeah.
Or the art was I couldn't remember if the film. Forgive me. What was the name of the movie again? What was the? It's okay.
Hand.
Yeah. So the hand.
It was the dissident artist who was expressing his concern of the state trying to control people's thinking. You will think this way. In essence, what we now, it's so commonplace. We have a name for it. It's called being politically correct.
Right. So and that's the problem is that I think it's being called politically correct, but it's actually politically it's more incorrect than anything. And so maybe we could paint a picture that has to do with what I wanted to do is see parallels in history where countries have led to socialism or led to, maybe even look at some of the parallels that happened in Germany going. I mean, they were a socialist, or maybe some of the parallels that happened there, in accordance with what's happening with our country now.
Without actually, I was thinking about this. I used to Minnesota. Minnesota is a place that I have some experience with, and they just recently elected that Omar, Representative Omar she's from Minnesota. She's a Somali by birth, and the thing that's disturbing. I'm going to get to where you're going, but how I'm going to get there is I'm going to tell a story because that's how it works.
Please do.
You've got this gal. She's a representative. She's a member of the House of Representatives from Minnesota, and she's making blatantly anti-Semitic statements. It's in her DNA because it's her cultural heritage, her cultural background. She, Somali by birth, came to America. She's living the American dream. She came from a different country. She's here. She's a U.S. citizen. She's been duly elected to be a member of the House of Representatives, and now that she's got that, she has her little bully puppet, and she's popping off about anti-Semitic this and that, and the AIPAC is in control of this and that. And what got me thinking is, from a historical point of view, is this isn't new. And she's a socialist, far left. The term Nazi in English, we spell it N-A-Z-I, Nazi. Well, in the German, it's the NSADP. The NSADP. N is, I'm going to translate the words from the German to the English. In German, N is the German word for national is very close to national. S is socialist. They say it a little bit differently, but it translates to socialist. The A, that stands for Arbeiten. And for those of you out there, that might ring a bell if I say Arbeiten, because your history, your brain cells from way back in history is like, oh, Arbeiten. I may have heard of that. And if you may, it was probably in the context of Arbeiten or Arbeit macht frei, work shall set you free. It was on the gates of Auschwitz, Arbeiten. So that means work. The NSAD, D stands for Deutschland, which is Germany, and P is party. The NSADP, the Nazi Party, as we would call it in English, but in Germany, it was the NSADP, and it stood for the National Socialist Workers German Party. And so here's what I'm driving at. The last time we had socialists combined with anti-Semitism, things went really bad, and that was in Germany. You know, the National Socialist Workers German Party. And today, right now, we have a socialist spouting off anti-Semitic garbage. And this is, and you know what? If this was just an anomaly, if this was, I was like, well, okay, you know, these things happen. You got to shake it off. But it's even worse because there's a group out there called Antifa today. And they dress in black and they come to rallies of people that they don't like. And they smash things. You could look on this on YouTube. There's one guy, a professor, an adjunct profession, whatever, a guy, an educated man, takes a bike lock on a rope or on a handkerchief, and he whacks somebody else in the head that he disagrees with. The Antifa guy is the professor, and he's taking his weaponized bike lock and he's smacking people over the head. Well, they caught him, and he stood before a judge, and he got basically a smack on the wrist. Nothing significant.
Did he serve any time? I remember that, but I just can't remember. Did he serve any time?
I think it was. We'll have to look it up. But if I recall, it was the sentence was suspended or whatnot because no one was really hurt. You smack somebody over the head with a U-bolt, you could kill them, right?
Yeah.
He's lucky he wasn't looking at manslaughter charges. But the point I'm driving at is the professor dressed in black thought he was morally justified because he's an Antifa guy. He's out there ending free speech rights to those he disagrees with. But here's the irony. Going back to now that we have an actual elected socialist anti-Semitic in office, the Nazis had a thing very similar to Antifa. They were dressed in brown. They were called the SA. And you know what? You put a gun to my head, and I have a hard time telling you what the SA stood for. I know what the SS stands for. They're the Schutzstaffel. But the SA were referred to as the brown shirts because they had nice brown uniforms and they would wear swastikas. And they were see, this is a little bit of a history lesson here. The rise of Nazi Germany is a rather interesting story. You have the beer hall putsch in the 1920s, and Hitler has to go to jail, and he's there for a little while, and he comes back out. But in his early years, he's got some ex-military, hard drinking, It's okay.
Sorry.
He's got guys who are willing to use their fists. They're street fighters, is what they are. They're street fighters. And then they get a guy by the name of Ernst. I'm going to try to get the German rolling R here. Give me a second. Ernst Röhm, and he's the head dog of the SA. And oh, by the way, again, he's a socialist. They have I'm getting way too in the weeds, but the bottom line is Hitler used his SA or number one for his bodyguards. They would show up to rallies, and anybody who dared heckle Hitler, his SA guys would wade into the audience and beat the heckler senseless. And then, furthermore, if somebody somewhere else in the same town decided to have a counter protest, a counter speech, outlining why Hitler was wrong, well, guess who would show up? His stormtroopers. They were his SA.
Yeah.
And they would show up en masse, and they would beat the living daylights out of those who attended these anti-fascist rallies and smack them around and beat the speakers up. And then in 1933, once the Hitler takes power, well, the SA, they're actually full-blown murdering people because
okay, and so this is the important factor I want to point out here right away. So to them, okay, to these socialist nationalists, they were saying to themselves that they were basically defending the rights of the people. They thought they were doing something good, right? But the most important
the SA was all about me is everything.
what I mean is, but they felt like they were the anti-fascists. Did they consider themselves to be that type of thing, like an actual anti-fascism, or did they actually know that they were actually committing, committing themselves to such a thing? You know what I mean? Are you still there? I lost you. I just sent you another.
I'm sorry. Are you back? Are you there?
Yeah, it looks like you're here. Okay.
Okay, I dropped out for some reason.
Yeah, it's yeah. I don't know what that was.
That's okay. I'm back. So what I want to say is this. So for people to understand left and right, so that it makes sense. Imagine a triangle. What do you call a right angle triangle, where you've got the line going up, the line going down, and then you have the hypotenuse that connects both centers. If you looked at the line going up, and then next to that line going up, right, government control in your life. And then the line that makes the base of the triangle, the line that goes across, write the words freedom from government. And then find the middle of the hypotenuse, right? The middle of the line that connects the two triangle parts together. Find that middle. Find that middle. And then from there you go left and right. And if you go one click to the right, that's Republicans. You do one click to the left, that's Democrats. Now, this is where life gets complicated. There's not that many differentiations as you go to the right. You have Republicans to the right, you go farther to the right, you get a group of people called libertarians. And libertarians, basically in America, their stance is if it's in the Constitution, we're all for it, and if it's not in the Constitution, we're not for it. So, for example, nowhere in the Constitution are you going to find the words Secretary of Education. So they're going to say that whole department needs to be get rid of. It's not in the Constitution. They're also going to go on to say that, hey, the Constitution is completely silent on take whatever you want, abortion, gay marriage, and then their stance is going to be this is not the government's business, not the federal government's business, because it's not mentioned in the Constitution. And you look at the 9th and 10th Amendment, and it specifically spells out anything not mentioned by the Constitution is reserved for the people and for the states. So a libertarian's point of view is it's not in the Constitution. The federal government has no business meddling in these affairs. That's libertarians. You go one more click to the right, go to the very extreme of freedom of government in your life. You have anarchy. And anarchy is there is no law, there is no government. If you want to do something, you do it. And if someone wants to tell you to stop and they're able to make you stop, well, then you better stop. And then if they can't make you stop, then you just keep on doing what you do. Anarchy. and no one wants anarchy. Well, some people do, but they're nuts. Now, if you go back to the one click to the left, you have Democrats. Well, you go a further click to the left, and then we start getting, there's a bunch of lines. There's the Green Party. Well, what do the Greens want? Well, they want to tell you can't drive a car because it's fossil fuels, and they don't want you having, a big house with so many square feet. Your carbon footprint's too much. They want you to tone that down. They want you to have a composting toilet because it's better for the environment, right? They want more control over your life. You go further to the left, and then you start getting into socialism, which is communist light. Marx himself says that socialism is a preliminary step to the eventual goal is communism. The best analogy for socialism, people may have heard this or not, here's an analogy about governments with cows. Socialism is you have a bunch of cows. They're your cows. You wake up in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, you milk them at 4 o'clock, you milk them at noon, and you milk them at 5 o'clock at night, and you feed them. You have to buy the hay to feed your cows, and you get to keep, they're your cows. You got to take care of them, but the state gets to keep the milk, right? That's socialism. Communism is the state owns the cows. The state owns the milk. The state owns the hay. The state owns everything, and you get the privilege of working for it. And I wasn't going to do the full analogy, but the full analogy is you've got 5 cows. So 5 cows, socialism, they're your cows. The state keeps the milk. Communism is there's 5 cows, but they're not your cows. They're the people's cows. There's the government cows. And capitalism is you've got 5 cows. You sell to buy a bull, and now you're in business, right? And so, but we're going back to our triangle. Socialism is pretty up there with we're going to control your life. We're going to mandate what you can do and what you can't do, and how much money you can make. And if you make more than that, we're going to take even more with our progressive tax structure. And that's a whole other thing we should talk about, but not right now. And at the very and then right below the last step, so you have socialism, and again, we talked about it earlier, but this very evening, the NSADP. Where do the Nazis fit on this schedule? Well, the Nazis aren't far right, because far right is anarchy. Far right is take your uniforms, take your government, take your rules, take your regulations, and leave me the hell alone. That's not Nazism. Nazism is socialism. It says so. If you can close your eyes and imagine the Nazi flag, you've got a red flag sitting on a white disc with a black swastika. Those are symbols. They mean things. The black of the swastika stands for the will of the Führer, the will of the German people. The white disc is symbolic of what? The German people. They're white, they're Aryans. But the red blanket that it sits upon is their socialist communist values. And people who have a minor understanding of history will always point out, well, the communists and the socialists, the Nazis hated the communists. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Hitler's message is, well, we want everything the communists want. We want the state to control the economy. It's just that the communists in Hitler's day, in the 30s, were taking their orders from Moscow. And the message is, hey, we're Germany. We should be taking our orders from Germans. Goebbels, Joseph Goebbels, who was a high-ranking Nazi, before he became a high-ranking Nazi, was in fact a communist. He went to one of Hitler's rallies, heard the message, and says, he wants everything I want, except for he's all about the German people. You're right. We should stop taking orders from Russia and Stalin, and we should be doing this for the American or for the German people. And Goebbels went to his communist friends and say, you got to come join me over here because it's everything that we want as communists, except for it's for the German people. And so my point being is, so actually, instead of saying a notch below, you can flip a coin. Which has more control over your life? Nazism, fascism, socialism, or is it communism? Well, you look at each individual regime. The Nazis in the death camps, they killed about 12 million people. So going back to how everyone has their own little magic formula to make it work. Uh, OCA, I just call her Cortez or Manson
Yeah.
Land, the crazy gal, right? Her formula requires that in the next 12 years we don't drive cars, we take trains, and we get rid of jets because we have to, otherwise the planet will die, right? That's her crazy formula. Net result, people are going to die. If we really did that, just imagine. Well, again, we're getting way down to the woods. For the Nazis, their special little formula, their special little Formula X additive was, inferior people have to die. The Jews have to die. The Gypsies have to die. The Slavs, well, their overall plan with the Slavs were we need a workforce, so we'll educate them enough so they can read street signs so they won't get run over at crossing the street as your the master race Aryan comes zooming through with his Mercedes Benz. And I'm not making this up. That was their master plan for the Slavs. But people had to die to make things work. People got bogged down on I don't understand the details. Well, don't worry about the details. People have to die. So 12 million people die in the concentration camps, 6 million of which were the Jews, right? So the Jews got it extra hard, but there were other people getting it hard too, and it's bad across the board. But if you were to lay the entire death toll and just blame it on Germany, which is legitimate because they started the war, and total death toll when I was in high school, the number they were using was 50 million, but has now since been revised, and it's actually sitting closer to 60 million. 60 million people died as a result of World War II, as a result of Hitler seizing power in Germany and things going to hell in a handbasket. That's a high number, right? That's a high number. That's it. Actually kind of small when you look at communism. Communism as a whole, its death toll is sitting at over 100 million. 20 million alone Stalin killed inside his own country without a war. You tally up the man-made famine in the Ukraine to people being sent off to the gulags and whatnot, and the purges, and there were lots and lots of purges. Stalin, his kill count alone is 20 million. You go and look at Pol Pot. Pol Pot in Cambodia killed 1/3 of his own population. Now, of course, Cambodia was about 6 million people, so his kill count is not, if you're looking at just straight numbers, he's kind of low. But if you look at percentage of population, that's pretty significant. So when they try to implement communism and with the Khmer Rouge try to implement communism in Cambodia, it's it's got to work. We need to try harder. It's not working, so let's try harder. And try harder translates to let's kill 1/3 of the population. 1/3 of the population. Then you go you look at China, and this is where your big numbers come in. From between the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward, Mao's trying to make communism work. He's trying as hard as he can, and net result is over 70 million people dead because of communism in China. Now they have since they sat down and kind of rethought the math on that. Part of that was with when Hong Kong reverted back to China control, and they didn't want to kill that cash cow. But we're talking during the life of Mao when they were trying to implement communism. Net result, 70 million people died. So going back to my triangle that I'm talking about, and again, they always love to try to put the Nazis on the right side of the equation. It's like, you're wrong. Yeah, the Nazis had a problem. They were racists. Absolutely correct. That's not a right-left thing. It's a government control of your life. Oh, the government has decided you're racially not fit to live, and now the government's going to round you up and kill you. Yeah, that's a left thing. Government controlling your life, and the communists, they've got a class thing. Oh, you're of this class? Well, the math says here in our master book you have to die. It's part of the recipe to bring about the workers' utopia. So we're going to round up and kill you and starve you, right? government control in your life, if that's your thing, congratulations, you're on the left. If freedom from government is your thing, well, then congratulations, you're on. This is how it goes. Now, are there some areas where the Republicans are like, well, we want control? It could be twisted laws. The have a for that. Now the libertarians don't. Don't get me wrong. See, so the farther to the left you go, so the left starts once you go left of the center. You're now wanting more government control your life. Republicans are just slightly right of center, and then you go farther to the right, and you have the libertarians like, oh, you want to get a prostitute? That's up to you, man. I'm not going to stop you. And the libertarians, their other position is, you want to take drugs? You take drugs. I don't care. More power to you. But here's the difference between libertarians who are for drugs and Democrats who are for drugs. The libertarian will say, oh, now you're hooked and you need medical help? Oh, man, that sucks. You go get help. Oh, I'm not going to pay for it. As in, you're a heroin junkie and you've OD'd and you're dying on the sidewalk. I'm not going to pay an ambulance guy to come up and give you a shot an $80 shot to bring you back. That's on you, man. You're the one that overdosed. You can suffer the consequences. Oh, you're not ODing, but you need medical help because you're trying to get sober and your body's shaking because you're literally kicking the habit, right? The convulsions and the throw up and the mess. Yeah, that sucks. Don't ask me to pay for that. You yourself got hooked. It's your responsibility. You take care of yourself. And if you starve in the streets, that's not on me, man. Now, if people want to give charity, well, then, hey, I'm not going to stop them. But if I don't want to, I'm not going to. And by God, the government's not going to, because where is that in the Constitution, right? That's the libertarian point of view. And of course, you go farther to the right, you have anarchy where, there is no government at all. So going back to, well, Republicans aren't libertarians and they're not anarchists. They do believe in a social contract. They do believe in laws. They do believe in order. And they do believe that there's a compelling evidence of, for example, outlawing prostitution, because with other prostitution, there comes other problems, disease transmission, crime, drugs, all these other things. They want to mitigate that. And then that's why they pass laws against it. So long explanation of defining our terms of left and right, but going back to the history, a brief skimming of the history of the rise of socialism in Germany, using the SA, which was Hitler's tool to go out and use violence to shut down opposition, storm their newspapers and smash up their offices. I mean, physical violence. Show up to their anyone giving a speech counter to Hitler, smash the audience, smash the speaker, and then once you get control, flat out smash it. And you've got people today. And so this is a little bit of the teacher of me. Now, quiz time. Someone today is saying, well, the founding fathers. We're doing a shotgun spray here, but the founding fathers never envisioned an AK-47. So obviously, the First Amendment is only referring to muskets, because they weren't talking about military grade weapons. Now, who would say that? Someone who's like, get out of my life, government, leave me alone, or is that someone's like, I think the government, it needs to be in your life. They need to be regulating what you buy with your money, and a little bit of a explanation more on that. For the Second Amendment, when the founding fathers wrote that, yeah, they were talking about muskets, and they were talking about cannons too. And they did mean that. Oh, as in, if you joined the army and got a military issued weapon, it was a musket. And when the founding fathers said that anybody at home could have a musket, they were saying you can have access to the most sophisticated military grade weapon available. A man bought his own boat and he said, I want to put a cannon on it because there's pirates in the world. And he wrote a letter to James Madison Secretary of State, because now the Constitution's up and running, and said, if I've got the money, can I buy a cannon? And Madison wrote back and said, absolutely you can. It says so in the Second Amendment. If you could afford to buy a cannon as a private individual, then have at it, man. Buy a cannon. Of course you can. Of course you can. And that same analogy to say, well, the founding fathers had no idea about a AK-47. The equivalent argument would be to say, well, the founding fathers had no idea. In their wildest dreams, they had no idea that there would be typewriters or keyboards or Word or the internet, where some guy in his basement can reach out and touch more people than Ben Franklin, who had a monopoly of printing presses all through the colonies, right? They said freedom of press, freedom of speech, and it covers a guy with a microphone, it covers a guy on TV, it covers a guy on the radio, it covers people in their homes having discussion with their libtard relatives, if that's how you want to look at it. Or for them, they could say, I had to have Thanksgiving with my Neanderthal conservative whatever, right? The knife cuts both ways, and I admit that. But my point being is, anybody who is trying to say your rights should be taken down a step because hate speech. Because of hate speech. Well, I'm for free speech. I'm just against hate speech. Well, the question there is, who defines hate speech? I may be with you and I may be not with you. I'm not a hater. I don't like people hating each other. But who gets to define what hate speech is? Does Bernie Sanders get to make that decision? Does my insane brother-in-law who thinks banks are evil, does he get to decide what hate speech is? If I can define what hate speech is, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. But if you're going to define what hate speech is, maybe I'm not so for it. And I would love for them to say to themselves, well, okay, you have your definition, but what happens if somebody disagrees with you? And that's a bigger point there. So unlike the Nazis, who were all for shutting down speech that they disagreed with, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. As the country I grew up in, the Supreme Court case that was drilled into your head in your civics class, even in elementary school. Middle school. Well, no, it was. I was like in the 6th grade. I was still in. I wasn't middle school. It was the case of the Nazis in Skokie, Illinois. This is in the 1970s. And Skokie, Illinois, for those who don't know, had a very high Holocaust survivor population. A lot of Jews who survived the Holocaust for whatever reasons found themselves gathering in Skokie, Illinois, sort of the Dearborn, Michigan of the 70s, but instead of Muslims, it was Jews who survived the Holocaust. Huge population of Holocaust survivors. And the Illinois Nazis became a party. There was a bunch of lunatics who called themselves Nazis, and they wanted to have a parade, and they pulled a permit, and they were going to have a parade in, of all places in the country, Skokie, Illinois. Now, a lot of people said, hey, that's going to be offensive, and how dare you, have you no sense of shame? And the Nazis, like, we have our permit, we're going to march. And this case went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, well, this is America, and we have this little thing called freedom of speech. We also, in that same little amendment, First Amendment, we have freedom of assembly. So if a bunch of people want to call themselves Nazis and they pulled a permit and it's legal and they want to wave their flags and they want to go marching through Skokie, Illinois, they can, because we happen to be a free country. You're free to not be offended. It means people are going to say something and you may or may not agree with it. And if you disagree with it, the proper response is get your own permit and get people that agree with you and show up and then have speeches about how wrong the Nazis are. But here's the problem that's in Europe these days. They have speech laws. And because they've had a whole generation of people who haven't had to wrestle with hard thoughts, because it is against the law to be a Holocaust denier. And let's be very, very clear here. The Holocaust happened. Absolutely, it did. And we can go chapter on verse on the history. I know it because I'm a history geek, It's my passion. I love history. But there are a lot of people in America don't like history. In high school, they turn their minds off because they're like, this is killing me. I'd rather be playing basketball or whatever. And they're ignorant. And that doesn't mean that they're bad people. And it doesn't mean anything. It just means that some people I can't stand sports. I didn't watch the Super Bowl. Why? Because I'm bored by sports. I don't know who plays basketball, and I don't know. I know that Babe Ruth played baseball because he makes it into the history books because he was an important baseball player. My point being is a lot of people love sports. May they live long and be happy. As most people are for sports, I am for history. But what I'm driving at is in Europe, because there are anti-Holocaust denier laws, you have a whole generation that they haven't thought about it and they haven't dealt with it. And now and again, when someone does make these crazy claims, two things happen. One, the people are not prepared for that debate because they're ignorant. And then two, they're thinking, well, what is the government trying to hide? Why are they not letting this guy say what he needs to say? Is there truth behind his denials? Right? And so that breeds more ignorance and it breeds more people. Hey, there's something got to be going on here because the government's not allowing this guy to tell his facts. My response is let him tell his facts. Let him come out and I want to hear his entire case so I can take notes. So when I stand up to refute him, I can crush him on the facts, not and say you are delusional on this point, you're lying on that point, and then go down the line. Free and open discussion, even if it's with people I despise. Larry Flint. Larry Flint is, for those who may not know, because the internet has redefined everything, and I'm not a connoisseur of this particular stuff, but he was big in the 70s and 80s, and that's why I know his name. He's a guy in a wheelchair. He's a producer of, I believe it's Hustler. It's a pornography magazine, and the reason he's in a wheelchair, this is why I know him, is he was getting busy with some model gal who was married, and the husband showed up and he was angry and tried to kill Larry Flint. Shot him, but not shot him dead, but shot him, and now he's paralyzed from the waist down. So it's kind of a karma, how odd life is for some people. He's got more money than he could shake a stick at. I think he even has a gold-plated wheelchair. But my point being is, I think he's a vile man. I think he's vile and disgusting. He did an ad in the 80s insinuating that Jerry Falwell, who was a minister, TV evangelist of the day, he led a group called the Silent Majority, the Moral Majority, and Larry Flint did this ad in his magazine insinuating that Jerry Falwell had an incestuous relationship with his mother, right? And Jerry Falwell was rightfully offended, and he sued Larry Flint. Went all the way. I don't know if it went all the way to the Supreme Court. It may have, but the court ruled Larry Flint's got a magazine, and if he wants to do satire, even though it's tasteless, even though it's offensive, he can do that. It's his magazine. And as a guy who does not participate or buy, I'm an ethical believer. I'm not going to go into my faith, but I'll use Dennis Prager's term. I'm an ethical monotheist, and I happen to think pornography is a sin. I stay away from it. But here's the thing. I want Larry Flint doing what he does. I want him to have the freedom to print whatever he wants to print. Because if the state can shut him down, then the state has the authority to shut down religious texts that they find offensive. And I don't want that. I want Larry Flint to have the freedom to print what he wants to print. I want the Jehovah's Witnesses to have the freedom to print their interpretation of the Bible as they see it. May they live long and be happy. I disagree with them, but again, may they live long and be happy. I want the Mormons to have the freedom to print and as many copies of the Book of Mormon as they can. I'm trying to think of other religious groups out there that have their own thing. I'm not so hip on Islam. I have no problem against peaceful Muslims, to be sure, to be clear. And because, you know what, I actually I find the Quran to be extremely problematic. Extremely problematic. And we can go chapter and verse, and just a little bit of there. Chapter 9, Surah 9. It's referred to as the sword, the chapter, the verses of the sword. All of the chapters in the Quran start off with blah blah blah, according to Allah the most merciful. Not chapter 9. Chapter 9, there's no Allah the most merciful. And here's a little thing on the Quran. The Quran is organized not from the first chapter that was revealed to Muhammad, but and to the last chapter. It's organized by the longest chapter to the shortest chapter. So chapter 9 is the 9th longest chapter in the Quran. The Quran has a Islam has what's called the doctrine of abrogation, which is to say, if you're reading as Muhammad's receiving commandments here, there, and everywhere, if he receives a commandment down the line that contradicts an earlier commandment, the angel Gabriel tells him that he needs to ignore the earlier commandment and run with the later commandment. For example, in the earlier, it's again not the first chapter, second chapter, but when you find the chronological chapters that are early in Muhammad's career, he talks about don't come to prayers being drunk. Well, that's kind of odd because Muslims aren't supposed to drink now. Well, the reason that is because it's not till later on, farther down the line, that Muhammad receives a revelation not to drink. So even though Muslims early in Muhammad's career were allowed to come to prayers drunk, later on that's abrogated, and now they don't drink at all, supposedly. What I'm driving at is, yes, there are verses in the Quran where it says you have your religion and I have my religion. Why can't we just get along? Kumbaya. That's true. It's there. That's early in Muhammad's career. That's when he's just referred to as the Prophet Muhammad. Later in his career, he's referred to as General Prophet Muhammad. The last chapter revealed to Muhammad is chapter 9. And in chapter 9, it says explicitly, kill the disbelievers, kill the apostates. Someone leaves Islam, you are to kill them, execute them. And the Jews and the Christians wage everlasting war against them and kill them. So you see the happy, let's all be happy, let's all be friends, and you understand the law of abrogation, and you go, well, the last marching orders Muhammad gave to his followers on his deathbed is kill everybody that pisses me off. I have a problem with that. But that is a very lengthy statement to say this. This is America. Anybody who wants to print the Quran, may they print as many as they can. May they live long and be happy. I have a problem with the Quran. I am all for it being printed because I want people to know what it says. I don't want it to be hidden. I don't want people having to hide about. You want to be a Muslim, again, live long and be happy, and we can have a long discussion about peaceful Muslims versus not peaceful Muslims and who's interpreting what and who's the radical and whatever. That's not the discussion we're having now. The discussion we're having now is about freedom and anti-fascism. I am not for the silencing of anyone. Anyone should be able to say what they want, and people I disagree with, even doubly so. I want to hear what they say. I want to know how they think. And so if I'm ever in a position where I find myself having a discussion with them, I can have an intelligent discussion with them. I know where they're coming from because I've read their literature. And then I can say, yes, I've read that, I understand that, but what about X, Y, and Z? And then that's not people calling people's names, that's having an intelligent adult discussion. I don't know, I'm rambling. I got going there for a bit. But again, the fascism, the Antifa types don't want discussion. They want to silence discussion. They want you to do it their way, or they'll crack you over the head with a U-bolt.
And the most probably the most prominent thing that they like to use is the term Nazi. Like they always say, punching Nazis, getting rid of Nazis, killing Nazis, blah blah. That's the weird, twisted side of it. Is they're actually committing the same acts or the same thing that the Nazis did, and but they're on the reverse side. They're pretending that they're on the reverse side of it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. They, in their zeal, to crush Nazis, they're actually taking the totalitarian fascist outlook. Don't disagree with me, or I will crush you. And then, but if you ever get them, what's Nazi about? Take Trump for example. What Nazi thing has he said? Well, he wants to build a wall. Well, go to YouTube. You can get clips of Bill Clinton and Senator Obama, and everyone in between, and Nancy Pelosi saying we got a real crisis at the border and we should probably build a wall. So the question I have for you then is, were they lying when they said that then, or are they lying about we don't need a wall now? And the answer is they're just saying whatever they think is politically correct, politically expedient, and they have no center. They have no moral compass. They'll just say whatever is, they think will give them advantage today. So, I don't know what they believe. They'll just say whatever it takes. But going back to Trump, well, building a wall, no, that's not necessarily fascist or racist. I'm not getting it. And then they'll go into it's dog whistles. You have to, it's like, give me proof that the person's a racist and I will be against you. And don't give me this subjective, well, he said this and it's a dog whistle hearkening out to racists. I don't buy it. I don't buy it because, I'm not hearing it. And according to you, I'm a racist and I'm not. So, it's just, it's in my opinion,
crazy.
It's the result of being intellectually lazy at best, and at worst, they have been not educated but indoctrinated to wherever they went. They had teachers that didn't teach it used to be the college with the purpose of college was to teach you how to learn. And because no one would say, hey, in the next 4 years, we're going to teach you everything you need to know, and you'll be done from this point on, and you'll never have to pick up a book again as long as you live. The idea was, in 4 years, we're going to train you how to think critically and how to ask questions so that you can educate yourself beyond the training we're giving you here. But it has evolved from a higher education to an form of indoctrination. And with my girls in high school, it's trickling down into the high school. It's indoctrination. There's no critical thinking going on here. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just literally going to ask you, how do you combat that in school? I couldn't even imagine having a child in school, let alone high school right now, because there's like you said, it's a complete and total indoctrination. Most teachers right now believe that Antifa is a good thing and believe that Trump is horrible, and these are people that are teaching our public schools. So how do you combat that with your kids?
For me, I was very, very lucky. My oldest daughter was very inquisitive at a very young age. I remember driving around listening to talk radio when before she was old enough to go to school, and I'd be going to take her into work sometimes, whatever. And she'd be listening to what was being said on the radio, and she would ask, Dad, what does that mean? And I would look at her like, you were listening to that? So I'd turn off the radio and then just spend the time explaining whatever principle that she caught, and then I would explain it to her. And I'll share you a couple stories. So this started young. So she's in elementary school, and we would talk. And global warming, for example, when she was in elementary school, maybe middle school, I think 7th grade, the East Anglia college that had the professors that were colluding with Michael Mann, their emails got hacked, and so that was kind of the topic of the day. And I remember reading through them and finding some pretty juicy ones, and I would sit down and read with her and say, this guy is just admitting that his tree rings aren't giving him the results that he wants, so he's throwing out this batch of tree rings, and now he's getting the numbers that he wants. And then just talking with her, what do you think that means? And it's like, well, he's manipulating the formula. He's not just going off the raw numbers. He's cooking the books to get a predetermined answer. And then with that, we start talking about, hey, there's been ice ages, plural. You know, the world's got hot, the world's got cold, it got hot again and cold again. And we're here in Colorado, there's dinosaurs bones that we can go see, which is to say, there was a time. It's February right now. It's freezing cold outside. It's below freezing. It's snowing. It's cold. It's not. It's there's cold and it's nippy. It's pretty. I didn't have. It's cold. It's the bottom line. A Tyrannosaurus Rex would kill over and die in this temperature. But yet, at some point in Colorado history, there were Tyrannosaurus Rexes running around because it was warm, and this is before there were cars burning. Right? This is nature doing this. I'm grateful there's been a global warming. Otherwise, Minnesota would be a couple miles under ice. Right? It gets hot, it gets cold, and so we would have these discussions. And Miriam's first big realization of what was going on, she was sitting in class and they're talking about the global warming, and she raised her hand and asked the question about, well, why was it cold and then it got hot and cold again and hot again? There's been cycles of this before humans were even running around, because the scientists tell us that humans and dinosaurs did not live contemporary, right? There is zero human activity causing the world getting cold and warm and cold and warm. And the teacher said, that's a really good question, and then didn't answer it. And then from that point on, whenever the cycle came for global warming, Mary would raise her hand. The teacher refused to call her, and she noticed that. So that was when she was really.
Wow.
And then
Wow.
she got to say, well, this teacher. I'm going to give too much away of where I live, but
Yeah, don't.
Well, I'll just say this: her seventh grade teacher just made national news a while back. She was calling for the doxing of somebody, and she's now been suspended, thank the Lord. But I know this gal. I know her personally because one of the assignments was to do a poster board on current events. And this was during the Arab Spring. So Miriam came to me and we talked, and she found news articles. She did the work herself. I helped her.
Oh.
What she wanted to do was a timeline from the Ottoman Empire up till today, because the gist of what she was saying is this part of the world where the Arab Spring is taking place, Tunisia, Libya, all these, Egypt, it's never been a place where liberty lives. It's never been a Jacksonian democracy. It's always been under the boot of somebody or another. So I helped her with the timeline, and then she had a bunch of news stories about the Arab Spring. One of which was when the Syrian war just first started, that a Syrian soldier got killed, and one of his attackers went up there and cut the guy's heart out and ate it in front of the reporter. So he's writing this story of, like, I just watched the guy have his heart torn out, and this jihadi fighter, macking on the heart. And another one, and I remember this distinctly, the Muslim Brotherhood just took over in Egypt, and in Egyptian, as in other languages, there is male or female assigned words, like so. In German, there's male, neuter, and female, and one of the words I remember is das Fenster, the window. Das is neutral, der is male, and die is feminine. I can't think of examples there, but in Arabic, same thing. And the point I'm driving at is the ocean is a masculine word. So the Muslim Brotherhood came out with a law saying the ocean is masculine. Any woman caught swimming in the ocean will be executed for adultery. Right? That's crazy. That's crap crazy, but that's the Muslim Brotherhood. And so she had these stories, and she printed them out, and she put little footnotes on her timeline, and you could go back and you could reference this, and she had a bibliography too. And the teacher gave her a C. I was like, you have got to be freaking kidding me. So I walked in there, I made an appointment, came after class, and she had all the projects lined up. I said, can you show me an A project? And she refused the whole night there. I want to see what an A project looks like. If Miriam got a C, show me what an A looks like. How far did we miss the mark here? How far was she off? She refused to show me an A project. And then she said, well, your premise is all wrong. So we started talking about the details. And she said, listen, I was there. I was in Turkey. I saw the Arab Spring in person. I was at whatever public square. And I said, lady, people milling about at some public square in Turkey is not the Arab Spring. And I'll never forget this because she's like, are you telling me they're not Muslims in Turkey? I went, no, I'm telling you that in Turkey they call themselves what? And she oh, yeah, they're Turks in Turkey. And her project's about the Arab Spring. You idiot, right? Let's talk about the Arab Spring, not the Turkish Spring. And then about that time, she was done. And so I'm gonna. Here's another. So later on, one time, Miriam comes to me and says, "Dad, what do you think people you disagree with would explain? What's their explanation for the absolute economic destruction of the continent of Africa? Why is Africa so backwards and in trouble and struggling?" And I looked at her and I said, well, they would probably say that it is 100% due to European colonialism. The Europeans came in, exploited everyone, took all the wealth, pissed on them, and then left. That's exactly what my teacher said. No, I did not to piss on him, but that's what she said. That's her example. That's what I said. I know, Miriam, because I read what they have to say. I listen to what they have to say. I understand where they're coming from, and I can say that and say, well, they're not evil and they're haters, and I say that without demonizing them. Unlike the opposition, by the way, if you don't agree with them, you have no soul. You're evil. Blah 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 blah. Because they don't want to debate the facts. They'll just settle for character assassinating you, and then that way they don't have to deal with you. Kind of like who? The Nazis. Oh, well, you must be a Jew. And I'm not going to debate a Jew because we all know what Jews are and what they need to do. And, oh, you must be a gypsy. I'm not going to debate the facts with you. We're just going to round you up and shoot you because you are inferior to me, right? These themes repeat themselves over and over again. So you get these people, these true believers, and they don't. It's a waste of their time to debate with people who are out to destroy the world, be it through racial impurity. We can go back on that some more. Here's the crazy thing about anti-Semitism. It starts off in early Germany, pre-Hitler. The gripe against the Jew is, well, they won't assimilate. They dress funny, and they have weird names, and they look different. And this is Germany. Get with the program. And so by the 1920s and so, surprise, surprise, within Germany, the trend of Jewish Germans were to, hey, we're going to dress like the locals. We're going to, get rid of the silly hair, not silly, get rid, we're going to have haircuts that make us blend in. We're even going to adopt German names, right? And so then the anti-Semitism shifts from they want to assimilate to now the anti-Semitism of Hitler's day is we can't tell them apart. We don't know who's a Jew and who's not a Jew. And they're going to pollute the bloodline, which is to say, damned if you do and damned if you don't. When you have a group of people who, again, their formula calls for the destruction, there's no pleasing them. You cannot please them. And if you do, they shift the goalpost. And we can take that back to the modern day left. There's this, well, you're a hater. You're a hater if you think homosexuality is wrong. I am a child of the 70s. I am a child of the 70s, and there was a time where the worst thing in the world in high school would be if anyone thought you were gay. Oh my gosh, you think he's gay, right? It was a stigma. Now, hey, you know what? I can meet someone halfway saying, I don't want anyone being bullied for that. You know what? We can agree to disagree. May you have a long and happy life. You shouldn't be bullied. And I say that as one who was bullied for other reasons. We're not going to go into that now. And I have a daughter who's being bullied. And I hate and loathe bullying. But my point being is not, well, it's okay. Now we went from that to, well, now you have to accept gay marriage. And it's like, well, I've got 2 gay brothers-in-law, and that's an area that I understand where they're coming from. And we've thought about it and talked about it, and we can, in the final analysis, we can agree to disagree. Good people can do that. I want them to be happy, but I happen to think that there are areas well, the three reasons I have given to my gay brother-in-laws, and one of them, I'll give you the three, but I said, what do you have to say about that? And he couldn't counter what I had to say. He just said, I want to be happy. And I said, I understand that, and I want you to be happy too. But my three concerns regarding same-sex marriage, and it has been since before it was legal, this debate for me has been going on for 15 years now. My number one concern is, where does it stop? If your goal, if your standard is 2 consenting adults, I hope I'm not killing you with these long stories. Here's another.
Not at all.
Here's
Not at all. Not at all.
my last year at the University of Minnesota. I took a law class, and for those of you who've never taken a law class, you are assigned cases to read. You read, and then when you read a Supreme Court ruling, there's the facts of the case, and then you have to read the opinions. So whenever a case is brought up, you recite the facts of the case, because you're going to debate the case, and the facts aren't open for debate. The facts are what the facts are. You can't say, well, what happens if there was the gun wasn't loaded? You got to, the facts are the facts. You don't debate the facts, and then you read the opinions, and the opinions say what they say, and then you debate the opinions. So it's the last day of class. It is the last case of class, and I forgot the name of the case. This was overturned about 10 years ago, but this is where it goes. It sounds like I'm setting up a joke, but police want to talk to a gay bartender in Georgia. They show up to his house like 2 o'clock in the morning. They knock on the door. His roommate answers and says, the guy's not here. And the roommate says, you could check if you don't believe me. Well, police being police, they take him up on that. They come in the house. They go room to room. They get to the bartender's room, and lo and behold, they catch the bartender in the act with another guy. Well, this is Georgia, and there are laws against this. So the police arrest the gay bartender. They bring him in. Well, in the morning, the DA comes in bright and early and says, you arrested this guy for what? He says, release him now. Goes to the gay bartender, says, I am so sorry you were arrested for that. You have my apologies. Please go on your way. Well, the gay bartender, it goes all the Supreme Court. In his case, his stance was, I can do whatever I want to do in my house with a consenting adult. And the Supreme Court 5-4 ruling, the 5 said, we're not prepared to say that there is a constitutional right to be gay. We're not prepared to say that there's a constitutional right for incest. We're not prepared to say there's a constitutional right for a whole bunch of things, so we're not touching this. What we'll say to you, Mr. Bartender, is there are 25 states that don't have laws against this. There are 25 states that do have laws against this. You, as an American citizen, can, 1, move to a state that agrees with you. 2, because we're a republic and democracy, change the laws in the state that you live in to be compatible with you. Or 3, continue to live a risky behavior in that state, and no, you can get arrested. Now, I read the case, and then of course the dissenting opinions of, this is a travesty, this is a trample of human rights, and how dare the blah, 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 blah. And so after you recite the facts of the case and you summarize the opinion, the majority opinion, the instructor will say, who agrees with the Supreme Court? And then it's sort of devil's advocate. Well, out of 70 students, I wasn't going to say anything. It's like, I don't want to die on this hill. This is the last. And he gets to me. He's the last guy. I'm the last guy he looks at. He says, not even you? And I said, okay, that got me. I said, okay, I'll bite. I agree with the Supreme Court. And I had prepared myself for this. And I said, I believe the state has the right to say that some behavior is prohibited. For example, the state said to the Mormons, you can't have polygamy. And you know what? That's the law of the land. And I believe the state has the right to tell a 25-year-old woman that she cannot have sexual relations with her father. I believe the state. And I did that specifically because I knew that the crux of their argument is consenting adults. So you have a 25-year-old woman who's what? A consenting adult, and her father, consenting adult. And so we went back and forth and rah, rah, rah. And then he turns it to the class and who here disagrees with Mark? Who here And he's got to play. He's playing devil's advocate. And this is what he said. I'll never forget this. He said, "Who here does not have a problem? Does not have a problem with a 25-year-old woman getting busy with her father?" And all those hands went up because they had to be consistent, right? If you're telling, Sam and Dave that they can get busy because they're consenting adults, well, you can't tell Judy and her dad that they can't get busy because what? They're consenting adults. Now that was an intellectual exercise in college in 1990, whatever. Years later in my life, I had an assistant, and she grew up in foster care, and her foster sister today, this is right now today, there's a woman out there who's living with a guy, and to their neighbors, they present themselves as husband and wife. In reality, they're father and daughter. And my assistant, who grew up in the foster care, is like, well, yeah, well, if it makes her happy, there's nothing wrong with that. Because, so my first objection, and this is all since I have, this reality is, my concern was predated that. So my first concern that I told my gay brother-in-law is that my first concern is, where does it stop? If your criteria is 2 consenting adults, well, how about brother and sister? How about father and mother, right? Where does it stop? And oh, by the way, why does it have to be just 2? If you've got 5 people who are in love, it's called polyamory. You got, let's say, 3 gals and 4 guys. They're all in love and they want to get married and form a family. Why not them, right? So that was my number 2, polygamy and polyamory. Where does it stop between your consenting adults? Define that for me. If you can guarantee me it's just gonna end with 2 guys or 2 gals and not morph into blood relations or multiple people. And no one gets my third point. Everyone thinks my third point is the weakest. Being a history guy, I think it's the most powerful. I would say not even the Greeks were for same-sex marriage. The Greeks were the most. Look at my picture. Pelopidas. He was a Greek. Pelopidas belonged to the Theban sacred band. The Theban sacred band, they get wiped out fighting Alexander the Great, and the commentators say they died as they lived. Their bodies were interwoven with each other. When they weren't practicing for war, they were getting busy with each other. And the Greek ideal was, if you want to have sex for recreation, you're hanging out with the guys. If you want to have sex for procreation, you're having sex with your wife. And the reason that's important is now everyone knows who's related to who. This is my son, this is my daughter, that's your son, that's your daughter, and there's no half brothers and sisters running around getting married because there's order. There's order in the family when you keep the marriage between man and a woman, right? So I would say even the most pro-homosexual society that ever existed on the face of the earth understood that to avoid chaos, husband and wives get married, and that's what the institution of marriage is for. And no one thinks that's important, but that's my. And then I pointed out to him further. I said, you show me how it ends with just 2 guys or just 2 gals, and it doesn't expand from there. And I'll march with you. I'll march with you in a parade for the right to get married. But until you and then of course the one brother's response was, because he had no answer to that. His response was, "Well, I just want to be happy." I go, I know you do. And I want you to be happy too, but I don't want to sacrifice society being stable under the manner of you being happy, right?
And so you think, as a result, because of what's happened, I mean, there's many things that are chipping away at the stability of the country. Do you feel like that is a major player?
I think it's a symptom of. And that guy, I don't know how we got on that topic, but going back to my daughter in school. So now she's a senior, and ethical morality questions will come up in class, whatever. And everyone else is, maybe I'll get her on she wrote a paper on abortion, and she starts off talking about vivisections, about doing medical experiments on animals, bunnies, testing little, pouring soap into a bunny's eye to see what happens. Will this soap blind you or not, right? Because we want to know, hey, is this soap safe for people? Well, okay, let's test it. Let's test it on right? Vivisections. It's a particularly nasty thing to think about, and it happens. And so what she did is she constructed a scenario where people are just enraged that how could anyone do that to a creature, a living creature? And then she shifts gears and starts going into the details of abortion. It's like, you're upset because animals are being tortured, but you are completely fine with human babies being torn to pieces, right? And then she addresses all the concerns and she goes through it, and it's brilliant. And one of her most brilliant points is like, what happens if it's got Down syndrome? The Holocaust, going back to the Nazis at the beginning, the Holocaust didn't start with the Jews, and it didn't start with the gays, and it didn't start with the Slavs, and it didn't start with the Gypsies. The Holocaust starts in Nazi Germany with, I don't have the German phrase memorized, but it translates to life unworthy of life. Well, what does he mean by that? What's life unworthy of life? It's the mentally handicapped. It's the physically deformed, people who aren't, according to the state, productive members of society. They're a drain on society. They have to live in institutions and have medical care, and they cost more than what they produce. Their life unworthy of life. So we're going to, and here's the fancy word, euthanize them. We're going to euthanize them because it's the compassionate thing to do. Right. So Miriam ends her thing with like, well, you have a Down syndrome baby in the womb. The Nazis killed it, would kill your child outside the womb. You're killing this child for the same reason inside your room. I don't see a difference. I don't see a difference between what the Nazis approach to that life and your approach. You're both hideous, right? And she didn't say it in those words exactly, but that's what it translates to. And here's the most powerful thing. She sat down and all her friends said, well, I'm pro-choice, and you've said things I've never thought about, but and I'm very, very disturbed by what you had to say because it's really made me think, but I'm still pro-choice. And it's like, okay, well, that's a sign of being indoctrinated. You just heard something counter. You acknowledged all of the arguments. You acknowledged that her point is valid, but it didn't persuade you. It didn't change your mind because your mind isn't designed to be changed to the truth. Your mind has been indoctrinated into a certain way of thinking. And that's what it was. People say, well, you're politically, you're on the right. I go, I'm not right. And I'm not left. I'm a seeker of the truth. My positions are a result of being concerned about the truth. And if the truth puts me in a political camp, then I'm in that political camp because of the truth. Now, to be short, I am not completely happy with with Republicans on all things, but on some key issues, for example, it's getting late. I'm going to have to call it quits here in a second. But
It's fine.
But for example, abortion, right? We could have the debate started off in my youth, safe, legal, and rare. Did you hear Bill Clinton say that?
Right. That's a big saying.
Ban of what? 30 years? Well, Roe v. Wade is 72, so in less than 50 years, 48 years, it's 2019, 47 years. In the span of 47 years, we went from safe, legal, and rare to New York, where they passed a law saying you don't have to be a trained medical doctor to perform an abortion. You don't have to be in a hospital setting.
You don't have to keep someone alive. You just have to kill somebody.
Right. You could shoot a pregnant woman, and if you didn't manage to kill her, but you killed her baby, you're not guilty of anything. Which is to say, you knock up your girlfriend, and she's pregnant, and she's happy. She's going to have a baby. But you're thinking, I just don't want to have a baby. And you go down to the store and you buy yourself that RU486 and you spike her coffee with it. And she drinks it, not knowing she just drank a pill that's going to murder her baby. And then she finds out and she's distraught. Hey, you just gave me an abortion that I didn't want. Well, we're in New York, baby. I didn't break any law because I just killed. I don't know what I killed. All I know is you were pregnant. You're not anymore, which makes me think of the bumper sticker. If it's not a baby, you're not pregnant, right? And so we went from safe, legal and rare to anybody can do it. I guess so. If you're New York, have a coat hanger will travel, right? You're in business, and so you could do an abortion to a willing person. You could do an abortion to an unwilling person, and hey, it's all cool in the game in New York. And you can do it all the way up to she's in labor and she decides she doesn't want to have a baby. Okay, well, call on the priests of Moloch and let's sacrifice that baby to the pagan gods of the Democrat Party. But
that makes me wonder. That makes me wonder what you just said before. That really makes me wonder is if it does make you wonder how many are actually involved. I mean, probably a small amount, but there are probably some that are actually involuntary people, getting abortions involuntarily.
Oh, without a doubt, because you hear horrible stories of an enraged boyfriend. He viciously beats his girlfriend who's pregnant and knows she's pregnant and causes a miscarriage, right? From being brutish like that to well, like I said, it's not a huge leap to imagine a scenario where someone's like, oh, well, you get somebody who's just crazy and the crazy one, a woman who can't have a child, and she's, there's the ones who like they'll stalk a pregnant woman, kill her, and cut out the baby and try to call it his own. There's that level of crazy. But imagine the polar opposite of that crazy. I hate women who can have babies because I can't. It's not fair. And so you get someone who just says, I'm going to start slipping those, offer them drinks, and when they're not looking, and there's herbs and whatnot, And I'm not saying there's an epidemic of that, but what I'm saying is in New York, if you did that, you're not guilty of a crime, because we went from safe, legal, and rare to
almost always.
Anybody can do it at any time.
Yeah.
And that gets a standing ovation. It's that.
Do you think? Sorry, do you think? I know that you want to cut it, so I just want to ask you a few more questions. Do you think that because they've gone this far, do you think that it's just going to keep going, or do you think that it'll actually be snuffed out in some spots, or do you think it's actually we're trying to do it in Virginia? They were trying in other states. Apparently, there are like 7 states that want to do it. So,
correct. I think it's going to, from a constitutional point of view, this is what people who they talk about how here's
it's a tipping point, right?
Well, here's the difference between people who talk in facts and truth and versus those who scaremonger. If you remember, Kavanaugh was they tried to lynch Kavanaugh, technically lynch him, because they're thinking he's a Catholic, he's going to be a pro-choice vote on the Supreme Court, and we have to keep Roe v. Wade at all costs, because if Roe v. Wade is overturned, there'll be no more abortions at all in the country. And this is the thing that they're scaremongering for. If Roe v. Wade were to be overturned, that result would be the 9th and 10th Amendment. Anything not spelled out in the Constitution is left to the states. So what that means is, if Nebraska wants to pass a law saying no partial birth abortions, well, then guess what? In the state of Nebraska, no partial birth abortions. And if New York wants to say have coat hanger will travel anytime, anywhere, just as long as the mother doesn't die, well, then that's how they roll in New York. And if Idaho wants to ban it completely, or Texas wants to ban it completely, under no circumstances, not even rape, not even incest, not even for the life of the mother, well, then that's how they roll in Texas. I'm not saying Texas is going to do that. I'm just using it as an example.
My point is go blue because of Beto idiot.
Exactly, right. But people who are freaking out on that are scaremongers, and they are betting on the ignorance of the average American, who will go, oh, well, I don't want partial birth abortion or late-term abortion, but, we can't get rid of it completely. We have to stop Kavanaugh. And it's completely false. The right's dream is, well, get the federal government out of it. They have no jurisdiction because the Constitution says so. Because you could read the Constitution, do a word search, millennial. You don't have to read the whole Constitution. Put it into some doc and do a word search. Type in the word abortion, and you'll get 0 hits in the Constitution. Not one, because it's not mentioned. And you go back to the 10th Amendment saying anything not mentioned by the Constitution is delegated to the states. And then there you go. Let the states decide. That's all I'm asking for. That's all. That's all that anybody on quote the right is asking for. Let the states decide. And if you disagree with the state that you live in, you can either A, move to a state that you agree with, B, try to change the laws where you live, or C, continue in your risky behavior. And if you're caught murdering a baby, then you'll face the consequences.
It's just so weird how they just continuously. Anyway, they hate Trump so much, but they just want to be able to murder their own baby. It's just the weirdest. It's so crazy.
It's a bad, and there's no end. Obamacare talked. There, unlike the rhetoric that Obama, if you want to keep your doctor, you can keep. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. If you like your doctor, and he also said there's no death penalty. Yes, there are. There are death. Not death penalties. Death. What's the word I'm looking for? Death counsel. Because you're gonna have a bunch of bureaucrats, and they're gonna look at your life and say, "Well, how old are you? Oh, you're 87." Well, Obama plan said, "Well, we got to cap the cost somewhere. If grandma needs a surgery, but she's old, then maybe grandma just gets a pill." That's a way of saying we're not going to give you the best medicine you can get. We're just going to give you something to handle the pain, and then you're going to die. That's the reality of socialized medicine. You can Google horror stories all across Europe because that's the facts. When you're saying medicine is free, everybody gets a Band-Aid, and not everyone gets an MRI.
Do you think that I've been watching a lot of news about Europe. Europe is in shambles right now. Do you think that England will ever be able to break free of the EU, or do you think it's just not? I think it'll never happen. I think the only thing that's going to actually break them free is if they actually revolt.
Since they voted for it. They voted for it, and I sincerely hope that they do. But Theresa May and her people, they don't have the will, and they're weasels, and they're trying to.
They're just awful.
Who the deal? Just walk away. Just walk away.
I don't think they will, though. They're, like you said, they're under too much control, and they'll never do it. It's really sad.
Very sad. They're losing their sovereignty, and the EU wasn't. It started off just being sort of an economic union, not European Union, but also just like an economic understanding. Peter Hitchens, if you want to, Peter Hitchens does a documentary on it, and it's an hour and a half long. And at one point, he says the first year, like 1970, whatever, he said it's a law library, and this is all the regulations from the EU, and it doesn't even take up, it's just 1 or 2 volumes, and then each year, the next year, it's a whole shelf, and then
holy cow,
and the new stuff each year that's coming out, right? So the lawyers have to get up to speed on what all the new stuff, and then by modern day times, it's entire bookshelves of regulations and laws coming out of the EU, and it's not what England signed up for, and it's very painful to watch. But you have, again, people who are indoctrinated. Oh, we have to be part of it, blah, blah, blah. And you have the free thinkers like, no, actually, I like my freedom of speech. I like the rights that I had as a subject of the Crown of England, and now I'm losing them because the EU is mandating, this, that, and the other thing. It's very painful to watch.
Yeah,
very enjoyable, but I'm actually using my daughter's computer.
That's fine, man. Last but not least, I was going to ask you about just 2 cents about the Jussie Smollett.
The hoaxer.
Yeah, the crazy. I mean, the hoaxer. That's great. Oh, that's great. That's great.
We're talking Chicago, where I don't know what their murder rate is right now, but come summertime, things get hopping, especially when there's like a 3-day weekend in the summertime. It was always fun to watch the news coming on Tuesday morning and how many people got shot over a 3-day weekend, 4th of July weekend, whatnot. The police there have real problems to be working on, gangs and the whatnot, and the reason this guy thought he could get away with it is because he's not the first hoaxer, and we in America, for reasons I don't understand, haven't punished the hoaxers, and so hoaxers keep coming. And so we're asking for it. What we need to do as a nation, and this goes back to Tuwala Brawny, we need to say to them, this is serious.
And it's big.
This people's lives are going to be destroyed, and if you file a false claim, we're going to come back at you with the same fury. And what they ought to pass law saying, if you're gonna amp up hate crimes, say, hey, you punch somebody in the face, you're going to get this penalty. But if we determine you punched them because you hated them, because they're a protected class, well, then the penalty is even worse. And if you try to perpetrate a crime saying Magna people did this to me, well, what are you doing? It's a hate crime. You're trying to create hate and hostility towards people who wear a baseball hat. And so he should be treated as if he committed a hate crime. He perpetrated.
It's really sad. Yeah, it's really sad how he won't be.
I'm sorry, what?
I was just saying it's really sad how he. Do you think he'll actually?
No. Well, I read this. Apparently, the TV show he works for got a terroristic letter in the mail, and they're kind of thinking it was from him. So that's from CBN Chicago, and the person I was reading, it's like CBN is the only one that's been. They've got a source. And every time they've done a report on this guy, they've been spot on. So now CBN in Chicago, I think it's CWN out of Chicago, they're saying that one of the places that was searched, either the two Nigerians' place or his place, someplace got searched, and magazines were taken for evidence, and the terroristic hate letter that was sent in, used letters cut out of a magazine. So if they're matching up the magazine to the letters that were sent to the mail with terroristic threats, then it goes serious, because now you're looking at making terroristic threats, and that can't be ignored.
So you're saying, okay, so you're telling me that that the studio that hires him for the TV show that he's on,
yeah,
you received a death threat or a bomb threat, or what was it?
I just what the article said, it was a terroristic threat,
and so they think it's from Smollett.
Correct.
Wow.
So it's the news agency CWN out of Chicago is reporting that their tipster is saying they got the magazines that were used to write the letter, and it was either in the Nigerian's home that he hired to beat himself up. And get this, America is so racist that a gay black man has to hire Nigerians to do what? To do a job Americans won't do. There should be a meme on that one. It's so racist. A gay black man has to hire Nigerians to beat on him because he's a gay black man. That's just priceless. You couldn't find someone to do that for you. I thought this was America. I thought this was racist. And here's the reality on that, Ben. I should have said that. You can edit out. You can edit that out.
Okay.
Here's the reality. Okay. Here's the reality. There are probably more flat earthers and victims of Catholic clergy sex abuse than there are actual racists in this country. If you were to do a head count of all the flat earthers and throw in the victims of Catholic sexual abuse, and then get a head count of those who are actual Klansmen and actual Nazis, my money would be more flat earthers and more victims of Catholic. Which is I'm not mitigating the abuse of the Catholic people there. I'm saying that there's a lot of them, and I'm saying that there's a lot of flat earthers, and I'm saying that actual white power racist dudes would not equal those numbers.
Yep.
This guy wanted to get beat on, and he had to hire people to do that because he couldn't find anyone to do it himself. But I gotta call tonight, Joe.
Okay. Hey, thanks, man.
We'll do it again.
Have a great night, man. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.